I call Dennis O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. New Zealand First does support these various bills as amended, and the most important one for me concerned the official information requests as well. These amendments were made to the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 and to the Official Information Act 1982, which would allow official information applications to be made orally. This is important for people not comfortable with doing things in writing and can be a huge barrier for many people. Mr Speaker, it includes the elderly. It includes, for example, dyslexic people. It includes people who can express themselves orally but who struggle doing anything like this in writing. And it includes people for whom English is not a first language and who cannot write English very well but can usually make themselves understood orally. And it includes, for example, sight-impaired people, and the list goes on. So, Mr Speaker, the point here is that access to official information is an important human right, a very important human right, so it must not be compromised by official bureaucracy or obstructed in any way. And indeed, government agencies and local governments need to be proactive in assisting people to get the information they need. And I'm sad to say that I don't think that really is the case often enough in New Zealand at the present time. And Mr Speaker, I would also have to say, sadly, that local government, some but not all councils, are in fact the worst offenders. And like many other people, I've had personal experience of this. Christchurch City has been one of the worst offenders in this. And my personal experience related to information I tried to get perfectly reasonably concerning that council's recycling operations a couple of years ago. It was perfectly clear that they had something to hide, and they were going to use the rules under this legislation to try to avoid giving the information that was being requested. And they went to extraordinary lengths to do that. And Mr Speaker, that leaves people in the position of having to take the time and effort to go to the Ombudsman. But the Ombudsman, of course, only has relatively limited power, and it too, I think, is far too easily disregarded by councils, or at least the Ombudsman's determinations are not properly acted upon in too many cases. So I want to use this occasion to say how disgusted I've been in the past with the Christchurch City Council over its handling of official information requests in the past. And we as members of Parliament need to take a great deal more interest in this, because far too many people in this country have too much difficulty in getting the information they're entitled to. The whole area, Mr Speaker, needs more review, and people need easier ways to hold both government agencies and local government to account over the many and various ways of avoiding their official information obligations. Now, Mr Speaker, this legislation by its nature is limited in how far it can go for that purpose, but it does make a minor yet very worthwhile step forward by making it clear that official information requests under both of those principal acts can be made orally, and if so, must be acted upon. But the amendment also now says that local authorities or agencies may then request that oral requests be put in writing. So again, councils and agencies might just always do that as a matter of course, might abuse that provision. And thus a request for a written version would be open to abuse if a local authority or agency actually did want to be obstructive. And as I've said, Mr Speaker, too many do just that. So I'm glad to see that one of the amendments in the legislation now makes a request for an application to be converted into writing conditional, allowing the request for a written version only if it is reasonably necessary for the purpose of clarifying it. I'm glad to see that's now in the legislation. And that should only be necessary in an extreme minority of cases. So I, for one, will be watching and listening to see whether government agencies and councils actually obey the clear intent of the bill, so that when applications are made orally and are then requested to be turned into writing, that is only done for the purpose of clarifying the question, not for the purpose of conducting some kind of exercise in delaying or obfuscating the request. And Mr. Speaker, I expect the Ombudsman will be watching that closely too. So the message has to be to government agencies and local government to watch out. Here's the first step being taken to avoid this kind of abuse, and people are watching, and those agencies and those councils need to toe the line. But, Mr. Speaker, as far as this legislation is concerned, there is now a satisfactory balance between unclear applications and the right of the applicant to rely on an oral request. That's the way it is in the law. We now want to see that that is operated satisfactorily in practice. Now, Mr. Speaker, finally, as far as the dozens of other minor or technical changes made in this pretty large piece of legislation and the various bills are concerned, we in New Zealand First think they're all sensible changes, and so we'll be happy to vote for the bill as a whole, the bills as a whole.
I call Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.